All right. Hello, everyone. Good Sunday night to everyone. This is July 27th, and this is episode 21 of Dispersing the Fog. I'm Adam Rogers here with Paul Palango. How are you doing, Paul?
I am doing fine. How are you doing?
Oh, doing great. Yeah. It's been here we are in the middle of the summer, and things are heating up. Stories are heating up, and we've got some great ones to talk about tonight. We also have a guest coming tonight who's been on the show a couple of weeks ago now. I guess Curt Allen's going to be joining us after a little bit here, so people can look forward to that. He's got some interesting things to say again tonight. But first, let's catch up, Paul. I haven't seen you since a little while now, and uh,
I'm still the same.
yeah. Here, I'll let me. I had a little bit of a week. I'll two things I guess I'll mention. One is I had two preliminary hearings this week on drug matters. So I'll tell people just a little bit about what goes into thinking about a preliminary hearing in court. But also, before I get to that, I was down your way a little bit earlier this week, Paul, to do a sale on the Blue Nose out of Lunenburg. Yeah. So people can go on the Blue Nose, book spots, but actually somebody I know chartered the Blue Nose. You can do this. You can charter the Blue Nose. So out we go and out from Lunenburg out to Blue Rocks. Uh,
Yeah, Blue Rock's one of my favorite, Sharon's favorite places in Nova Scotia.
it's beautiful, right? And
It's so different. It's not Peggy's Cove. It's like Blue Rocks is so distinct.
and sort of raw and natural and fresh in its own way compared to Peggy's Cove, for example. Anyway, what a thing, right? Just to see the crew like this. It's a bunch of young people from across the country working on the Blue Nose, very coordinated, great sailing skills, and anyway, it's quite a marvel. So yeah, anyway, that's kind of a quick trip back and forth. Sorry I didn't stop in to see you. I had to rush back to get to
I
court.
heard you going by on the highway.
Oh
Yeah.
man. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about the RCMP short staffed as I was rushing to get back to court, but
But
kept
not
everything
around
easy.
here. Like the thing is now, the public safety minister, Becky Drouin in Nova Scotia, is from Lunenburg. And so now that detachment looks like it's fully stocked up as a show and tell to show her. Everything else could be a disaster, but Lunenburg now has a lot of Mounties in it. I mean,
Well,
they're actually stopping cars for the first time in 5 years. It's
yeah. Well, you know what it's like, right? Politicians. I remember a provincial campaign manager at one point told me like we do all this focus group stuff and numbers, and all of a sudden the minister hears from somebody at Tim Hortons and the policy's completely changed.
right.
Yeah. So anyway, no, that was good. And a couple of preliminary hearing on drug matters. I was just going to say, for people that might be interested in the process of a criminal trial, preliminary hearing is where you decide, or the judge decides, if there's enough evidence to go to trial. But it's a very low threshold to actually get from, a preliminary hearing to trial. You just have to have evidence that could be believed. So as a defense lawyer, mostly what you're trying to do is just get some markers, right? Some stuff that's on the record. Okay, you answered this way, stuff that you might be able to use later at trial. So anyway, key point in the process, and yeah, so that was my week.
I had Well, my usual week, sort of, we're still chasing Corey Ellison. We're not going to do Corey Ellison stuff today. It's a lot of interest in the who killed Corey Ellison, who killed Corey Ellison. We're gathering more stuff. Information is coming in all the time. For example, I had a tip about one of our so-called suspects in the Corey Ellison shooting was at a social function that we had advance warning they were going to be there, but we're playing fair. We're not going to harass them or dox them or get in their face. We're going to act responsibly and build our case bit by bit by bit. And hopefully the other media gets involved. We have people out there who want to tell us stuff or are telling us stuff, and we'll move forward in due course.
You mentioned that that's interesting, Paul. Like, was that you're an investigative journalist? That must have been at times part of your approach on a story is All right, well, just find out where they are and show up, like if they won't get back to you.
Yeah, but this is a case where we haven't got that far along, and we're not going to go and just start asking questions at a social function or whatever. We'll do stuff formally.
Yeah.
No, but people are telling us things, and they know they've already figured out who the suspects are, and they're coming forward and telling us stuff, and we're gathering the information. All of us.
Well,
But on
save
another note,
save it for book number three.
yeah, on
Uh,
another note, I had some visitors this week. Um, One was really, really touching. It was a woman wearing a cast on her arm. She has the same name as a late rock star. Um, had her stepson, whose it turns out father was a Mountie,
okay.
take her on a more than around a 2 hour round trip to my place. Showed up, and I said, "What can I do for you?" And she said, "I just want to come here and shake your hand for writing that book."
Well,
That was it.
wow.
I thought it was the sweetest thing. I've never, like I usually when somebody shows up in that situation, I got to be ready to duck.
Yeah,
And
that's a long way to go to
yeah, it's
just
a
meet
long
somebody
way
in
to
person.
go. And she just said she really appreciated Anatomy of a Cover-Up, and she just wanted to encourage me to keep going and you to keep going and whatever. And it was really nice.
So so Paul, I take it that you actually had a discussion back and forth. It wasn't just the handshake.
Well, yeah, we had a
Funny
brief
if it'd be funny if you
discussion.
did though. If you
Had
just
a
said,
brief
okay, see
discussion.
you
Her
later.
her stepson sat in the car the whole time and wasn't coming in. And
Okay.
I've had that before with Mounties sitting outside while their wives come in. Uh, no, it wasn't a surprise. But the second visitor I had got a call out of the blue, said, "I'm coming to see you. I want to get your book signed, my book signed from you." And I had no idea who this person was. And I got some brief stuff from the internet, but it didn't tell me anything. And then he showed up the other morning and had a coffee, sat around the kitchen table for an hour and a half, talked about this and that, told me his story. Then I checked it out with a few police people I know, and they're going, "He came to visit you? Why?" And I said, "Well, he seemed to be on the level." He said, "That guy is legendary as an undercover specialist. He infiltrated the Hells Angels."
Okay.
And um, he said he's very sharp. What was he like? And I said, he was very complimentary, and nothing happened. I kept my eyes on him the whole time, so if he's going to plant a bug in the house, I was watching him. Never took my eyes off him. And when he left and sent me a note. I signed my book for him, and that was it. But it's the message is that these are the kind of people who are coming forward. And this person came forward and said, "I want to tell you, I've gone through everything, and I am convinced that Gabriel Wortman was an RCMP agent, not an informant." And that's sort of the word that's I'm getting back from police and inside the justice system right across the country. Everyone thinks this, but nobody wants to say it publicly.
And distinction agent versus informant. Do you think that was meaningful to him?
Yeah, they said that being an agent would explain a big payout to him,
Okay.
and especially if he's an agent on a specific case as opposed to an informant. An
Yeah.
informant operates on their own and without direction. They basically try to help and give you this, that, and the other thing. Uh, an agent operates under direction. So they're essentially police officer. They're quasi police officers, and this it's sort of there are little hints of something like this through the evidence. When 2019, when Lisa Banfield sends an email to Wortman and says, "How does it feel being part of the cult?
Yeah.
What cult are we talking about?" You
Yeah.
know? And he called her deputy and stuff like that. And the police car the replica police car he had odd decals on it. You know, they had six decals on the back, his had 12. Was that a signal to real policemen that he was an agent, or that's how they could identify him from everyone else in a similar car? I don't know.
Something else though, Paul. I mean, you must have, you didn't know he was coming, this guy?
Hmm?
Or you knew he was coming?
He gave me a heads up like the
Okay.
day before. I'm going to be there at such a time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting though, like for someone in that position to think, well, I've read what you've done and yeah, it makes sense to me and it's going to be gratifying or that has to be, I guess, validating in some ways.
Well,
But
the
now,
biggest thing was he knew some people that I know in policing, and he didn't. We all didn't know he didn't know that I knew them and stuff like that. But it all turned out we all sort of know the same people.
okay. The only problem's not only did he plant a bug, but when you probably weren't looking, but now he has a handwriting sample from you. So who knows
Yeah,
what he
there
looked
you are.
like.
But he seems on the up and up, and I look forward to dealing with him in the future. I think that it may have been an introductory meeting, and there may be more stuff coming in the future. You wanted to see, how we felt each other out, and
This is
I showed him around our glass studio, and he was pretty impressed. And
Yeah, well, anybody would be. I've seen that glass studio. This is something that we kind of share, Paul, in is a sort of a natural instinct to keep people's secrets too, right? So as an investigative journalist, you would have to be very careful about sources and okay, who told me that? And did they think they were going to be, their name publicized in any way and sort of defaulting to keeping it secret? I mean, as a lawyer, everything is secret, right? Solicitor-client privilege is sacrosanct. So it's nice for these sources to be able to know that they can trust you with that kind of stuff.
yeah, and that's what I'm noticing now. Like 5 years down the road, two books down the road, people are starting to come forward. I mean, someone else with ties to this week, someone else who I sort of communicated with, but not directly. They were sort of there. I know they're there. And now they're coming out of the woodwork and telling me a little more about some of the individuals involved in the massacres,
Hmm.
which is pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That's sort of stuff that's going to develop over the future. But people are now seeing that, you and I are not the bad guys here. And
No.
we're taking the risks and doing all this stuff. We're trying to get to the bottom and get to the truth.
Getting to the bottom of things and, you know, I guess reflecting on some of the lessons from the mass shooting and the Mass Casualty Commission, everything that's in your book. We've talked a little bit, well, not a little bit. We've talked about the policing review in Nova Scotia, and it just seems like anyway, Paul, it's like there's more and more opposition to it. There's more municipal forces coming out and speaking out about it. So we'll talk about that. Maybe we'll get into that with Curt Allen a little bit.
Well, I think we're going to get into that. I mean, one of I was on the Todd Vino show in Halifax the other day, and the trigger for this was Jim Bronskill from Canadian Press did another really good story through Freedom of Information. He got out this workplace assessment of RCMP watchdog found clear call for change. That's the headline. The documents talk about the problems again, like the same problems as ever inside the RCMP. And it just raises questions like, how did a review of policing in Nova Scotia come up with the notion that the RCMP should be the police for all of Nova Scotia after the massacres? I went on Todd Vino and I said, think of this, Todd. If 22 people had been murdered in Halifax over a 13-hour period, or Truro, or New Glasgow, anywhere where there's a municipal police force, and
Mhm.
no one else was called in to help, and they did nothing to get in front of the person for 13 and a half hours. What would the response be of the government, the police services branch of the public safety ministry, and the RCMP? It would be get rid of that police force. They're incompetent.
Yeah.
In Nova Scotia, they've done the opposite. The Mounties did it. Um, nobody lost a day's pay from what I could tell. They were either allowed to retire or got promoted. Nothing ever happened. No questions were ever asked.
And and Paul, that report on the workplace issues in the RCMP, as you say, that is not, it's a new report, but it's not a new comment on the RCMP and their workplace issues, the sexual assault sort of, and just that culture, right, within the RCMP that's been the subject of other reports and lots of coverage. And so it was curious to me that that wasn't mentioned in the policing review as, okay, you got to think of these things on a balance, right? Yes, there's factors in favor and against. Well, there was no discussion of, there's some workplace issues, some cultural issues with the RCMP that should be fixed, and that's something that we should consider when thinking about the overall question. It just wasn't brought up.
Well, in the last couple of weeks alone, there's been that story, a story on note taking by Dean Beebe saying the RCMP has failed in note taking, never improved in spite of promises that members are going to improve. We saw that during the mass casualty. The notes are horrible or missing or invisible. Bronskill did a story a couple of years ago on the unsustainable issue. The RCMP is unsustainable. The Bastarash report before that talked about the how broken the force was and had to be, could not be fixed essentially. The Braidwood inquiry in BC, the Cullen Commission in BC, the Alphonse McNeil report after Moncton, saying how bad things were and they never learned from the previous one in Mayerthorpe, the Linda Duxbury report, the Brown report. They all say the same thing, and you're wondering what's going on in police services in Nova Scotia. Do they not read anything they don't want to read, or do they read it and not understand it? I make the joke, it's like Otto. Remember the movie A Fish Called Wanda?
Yes.
Yeah, where Otto
Yeah.
says, I read philosophy, and Wanda says, yeah, apes can read philosophy, but that doesn't mean they understand it. And then Wanda says, for example, Otto, the London Underground is not a terrorist group. Aristotle was not Belgian. And that's what I get a feeling of the police services branch. If they're reading this, they don't understand what it's saying or they refuse to understand what it says. And it left me scratching my head, and you know where this is going to go.
Yeah, I do. I do. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I was just, there's other forces, there's other options in Nova Scotia. Like if there was a big, new school opening up or program and it was like, okay, which university in Nova Scotia is going to get this? And one of them had a super bad work culture and all that stuff, that would at least be taken into account. It's just bizarre that it wasn't at all in this important instance.
And one of the reasons is I've always said, and I keep saying it over and over again, I've been saying it for since 2008, when I really got onto this notion that police services branches in the provinces outside of Ontario and Quebec are filled with ex-Mounties and Mountie sympathizers. But you can't get a list. How can you prove this? And nobody seems interested in investigating it. No politician wants to ask a question. So I was looking at the police review, and one of the things that struck me about the police review is a person who was part of the whole process from the beginning and promoting it was someone named Haley Crichton, who's the executive director. And I said, who is she? Where did she come from? So the other day I went looking around for Haley Crichton. What's her background? From Toronto, went to Lawrence Park High School, nice area of Toronto. Went to did her master's degree at Memorial University in Newfoundland. Looked at her CV and it said, oh, she had a 3 year. Well, after she got an $80,000 grant to do a PhD on corrections and sort of sociology and the correction system and prisoners in isolation and things like that. She got an $80,000 grant. And then one CV has her working for 3 years for the government of Newfoundland. on a communications contract of some sort. But then one of my Jody, one of my citizen investigator friends who you've met,
Yeah.
Jody looked it up and says, "Well, there's another CV, and on that CV it shows she worked for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police for 3 years."
Okay.
Then, so this is in Newfoundland while she was going to school. So I don't find any evidence of her finishing her PhD. But Mark Fury, then the public safety minister, ex RCMP staff sergeant, he was in charge in Nova Scotia during the massacres. And when he left, just before he left at the beginning of 2021, Haley Crichton was hired into public safety as the manager of policing services. From what I can see, her first full time job.
Well,
And in 4 short years, she rises up to be the executive director of policing services in Nova Scotia. And I thought, I got to know more about her. Okay, she worked for the RCMP. And why is she pushing the RCMP in this sort of police review, saying there is no choice, the RCMP will always be here? And lo and behold, we do a public records real estate check, and Haley Crichton and her husband, Andrew O'Coin, own a house. I won't say where it is, but it's a nice house. You know it's a nice house by they paid 800,000 for it in October 2021 and got a $720,000 mortgage. That's what it says on the public record. So now we have the executive director of the Public Safety Ministry's Police Services, who's recommending the RCMP be the police service of Nova Scotia, while she has an $800,000 mortgage paid for by her and her husband, who happens to be a Mountie, an
oh,
award winning, decorated Mountie, but a Mountie nonetheless.
yeah.
So to me, what does that sound like to you?
Well, it was a real mystery to me. So we saw Haley Crichton at the Mass Casualty Commission. She testified there, and saw her title, executive director, and I was a little, uh, I don't know, I was caught off guard a little bit because somebody that senior, in, the Justice Department seems like they should be a known entity, right? I mean, I work in criminal law. I know the big players in the criminal law world in Nova Scotia. I went to law school at Dal. I know the professors there, even the ones that don't take classes from. You still know who they are, especially if they're public people. And I was in the corporate world as well, so I know a lot of the big lawyers and the people in the big, corporate firms. And hers was a name that was just in none of those circles. So I was like, where did she come from? And how did she get there?
And she's rocking it up. I mean, she started out below another an ex-Mountie who's working in police services, Reg McInnes, a former sergeant. And he's a program director, and she's now risen above him on the other side of the police services. But this shows you Mounties control the thing, and then they're recommending that it be the Mounties. So what this tells me is that Premier Tim Houston and other premiers before him like this sort of arrangement where they have people in place that they can control. The thing I hear about Haley Crichton, lovely person. Everyone likes her. And she's really good, as one person put it, at following orders.
Well,
She's told to do something, she gets it done.
Well, she's been very effective, Paul. Like I
Yeah.
saw her testify at the Mass Casualty Commission. I thought she did a really good job. Like I didn't agree with the points she was making, but you were like, wow, she's making those points in a very compelling way and speaking very clearly and very well. I thought she performed well. It just didn't, it just didn't add up what she was saying. So, but so she testified at the Mass Casualty Commission, but she was involved in the police review too, of course, and she was.
Yeah, her name's all over. Her and former Judge Claire McClellan were the people guiding this through. I'm not sure why Claire McClellan's there, but the one thing I'm getting really itchy feeling now every time I see ex Nova Scotia judge doing something. on some sort of committee or some sort of board or something, it makes me nervous that nothing really is going to change
Well,
because they seem to be the agents of the status quo.
not to get too political, I guess, Paul, but okay, so Mark Fury is a liberal. In addition to being ex-RCMP, he was a liberal justice minister. Uh, former Justice Claire McClelland was married to former Liberal Premier Russell McClelland. She wasn't married to him when he was Premier, I don't think. I think they were separated before that. Known as a tough judge, she was a Sydney judge, so I didn't appear in front of her that often. I always thought she was great. Just a quick story. I was doing a divorce settlement conference down there early on, and it wasn't budging, wasn't budging. She told her assistant, get that guy a cup of strong coffee, or a cup of strong tea. He needs, need to get him moving here. Anyway,
Well, I think we can go into this as I think um, this issue with Crichton should evolve. Even the lethargic media in Nova Scotia should start picking up on this.
oh,
And we're going to
he's a
get,
good player.
as it appears to me, I've had people say this looks like a conflict of interest. But the person who's going to rule on this is the premier, who's quite happy with the way things are because he's pro RCMP. He
Well,
doesn't want to hear anything else.
yeah.
It makes it look like, he's running the show. And as I said on Todd Vino, I don't think this guy, the premier, has the values that I don't like his values when it comes to choosing who the police are and what the police are going to do. And as Todd said, what values? I said, well, he was elected and people elected him. But remember, he spent 12 years offshore as an accountant helping rich people not pay taxes in Canada. He said, well, it wasn't illegal. No, probably wasn't illegal. But it doesn't mean I like you picking the police. It's sort of you're on the other side of a line that I wouldn't cross.
Well, if pro RCMP, if you look through the Premier's photos from the Antigonish Highland Games, you'll see one of myself and my old hockey teammate Devin Austin talking to him. But you'll also see one with him posed between two RCMP officers in their red serge uniform. It's
And
a
the
it's a
RCMP is
Scottish, it's a Scottish
yeah,
event. I don't know why the RCMP was even there.
and the RCMP is really good at one thing. It can't do policing very well across the country, but it's really good at sucking up to politicians.
Yeah, well, they
That's what they like to do. Or conversely, suck up to politicians or remind politicians that they could put them in jail, which tends to bring the politicians sucking up to them.
yeah.
That's the way it works.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's anyway, interesting. When they put on the red serge, it was a hot day too. But they make sure they wear them, shine their
Well, one,
boots.
one last thing. One last thing before we move on to Curt here. Um, no, maybe I'll come up when Curt's talking. I think we're getting into this area about this police review thing. I'll just hold it for now.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Paul, you sent me an interesting little story earlier in the week about the RCMP. I sent you back. I said, wouldn't it be something if they got knocked off for woke culture? What was it was a story about the RCMP having an issue with Indigenous people, right? And Indigenous communities, and thinking, well, that's a bad symbol and a bad anyway. It was Parks Canada not wanting to have the RCMP logo displayed in certain places because of the negative connotations vis-a-vis the Indigenous communities. And I said, well, wouldn't that be something if after all this stuff, it's not their competence or anything else that knocks them over, but it's sort of woke culture stuff.
Look, they're in trouble right across the country. And getting back to Nova Scotia, where they're saying, "Well, we want the RCMP." I got a call the other day about Moncton, which is near us, just across the border. The RCMP's largest detachment east of the BC and Alberta. Um, Moncton has, like Moncton, Dieppe, Riverview, have 180,000 population. The minimum requirement in Moncton for staffing for the RCMP on any given shift is 18 members for that population. Minimum.
Okay.
They're getting by a lot of times with 10, maybe less
In the city of Moncton.
in the city of Moncton. And, the Moncton taxpayers are still paying for it. And this is going on right across the country. I had another one out in Alberta the other day. Somebody said the whole overnight shift, there was no one on the overnight shift. I've got the logs from it showing the log that they're pleading for people to come in on overtime because there's no one on shift in a city of 90,000.
Can you imagine?
This is a problem. Everyone is recognizing it, but in Nova Scotia, and Premier Tim Houston, who's going, I love my Mounties. I think we need a fair assessment here.
It's a problem too because it's being discovered more. I mean, there's a principle of they do this in prisons, right? And if you if you think you're being watched, you'll behave in a certain way, whether you're being watched or not, right?
Yeah,
So, in the same way, if you think there's lots of police officers around and all that, you're going to behave in a certain way. Well, people, that may have worked for a while, but now that this is being uncovered more and more across the country, people are going to know, well, actually, there's probably not. And then, behavior will go correspondingly in that direction.
yeah.
Uh, Paul, waiting for Curt to join in here, and I'm sure he will any minute. But that's
See that there?
he's not. No, he's not in the Zoom waiting room just yet. I'll admit him once he joins
I'll
in.
send him a note.
Yeah, doing this in real time, folks.
Yeah, the other thing I had while we're waiting, I'll bring it up right now.
Yeah,
In the police review thing, one of the things I noticed in Nova Scotia, this is the other trick they use, and they used it in the Mass Casualty Commission and other things. They pretend to have people involved in activities like the implementation committee, but they have no say over anything. And in the police review in Nova Scotia, I noticed a list on the Public Engagement Advisory Committee that included Truro Police Chief Dave McNeil and Councillor Wayne Talbot from Truro, along with a whole bunch of other people, social justice warriors, and all kinds of things like that, different groups in this. And I sent Dave a note and I said, Chief McNeil, if you were on the Engagement Advisory Committee, how did the province come around to approving the idea that the RCMP take over policing in Nova Scotia? And he said, Paul, I represented the Nova Scotia Chiefs Association on the Public Engagement Advisory Committee, which dealt only with how the consultants were going to collect public feedback, i.e., their online survey and community meetings. Our role was very limited and had nothing to do with the overall review process or the findings. I'm as puzzled as you are.
wow, isn't
So,
that something? So Dave McNeil, now people would remember him, Chief McNeil from the Mass Casualty Commission hearings as well. Spoke very well. I think was came out of that with a great reputation actually for competence and leadership. So
yeah.
that's interesting that that's his take on things. So maybe a cynical person might wonder whether he was that whole committee, the purpose of that whole committee was to make it look like all of those people were going to, part of the recommendations and we're okay with them.
Yeah, that's what it's made to do. It's made to look like, oh, look, we reached out to everyone and everyone's part of it. And that's not what happened. I mean, on radio this week, we had the Glasgow chief, or last week on Friday, we had New Glasgow chief Ryan Leal
Yeah.
talking about they're trying to be polite, but explain that we don't understand what's going on here. But they never say a bad word about the RCMP. And that misleads the public because they think, well, they're not really saying anything bad about the RCMP. You have to read between the lines because there's memorandum of understanding. And in those memorandums of understanding, they have non-disparagement clauses so that one police force can't say anything bad about the other police force. The RCMP will make jokes that all they want about the municipal forces, call them the clown police, call them this and that. But God forbid if the municipal police said anything about the RCMP. They'll be down their throats, up the premier's butt end, basically complaining and do something about they can't say that about us. And so you're listening to these police chiefs, be very careful in listening to what they're saying because they are complaining the best they can without going over the line.
Yeah, I agree, Paul. Like they're even without the non-disparagement clause, which would be important for them to be considering, of course, they have to work with the RCMP. They, cooperate on files where they border each other's jurisdictions or sending in, things for the lab that the RCMP needs to handle or whatever, right? There's lots of reasons why they would need to have good relationships with each other. And so they wouldn't want to be too direct or too pointed in their criticisms in the media for sure. But yeah, just the fact that they're out there talking about it, that's significant enough. I mean, when's the last time anybody heard all of these police chiefs talking about any issue, right? In the public realm.
And it's a big issue because the issue comes down to, getting back to who killed Corey Ellison. If the Mounties did this, and we've been talking about this for 6, 7 weeks now, openly on radio, talk shows, podcasts, who is going to go and investigate this? We talked about it last week. You
Yeah.
said, well, CERT could go and investigate it, but who's going to make the complaint to CERT? The police services inside the public safety ministry, where are they? We don't see them stepping forward. They don't, they seem incapable of dealing with the RCMP because they're all ex-RCMP, or their allegiance is to the RCMP. The RCMP oath is essentially protect the buffalo. And we have bureaucrats inside government who seem to take it on. It's their mission to protect the RCMP. That's not right.
Someone else, Paul, is that could be a relevant player in this is the federal justice minister is a Nova Scotian MP, Sean Fraser, Pictou County as well, so that with municipal forces and RCMP presence. And it would be interesting. I'd be interested to hear his answer if he has one to, well, okay, if Nova Scotia, which is now, being subsidized in some say 30% or so from the federal government for policing where the RCMP is present. Okay. So would the federal government, if the province chose of their own free will to have their own police force, would the federal government still help fund that? Or is it wholly contingent on the RCMP? Like, why would it be? Or, it's a provincial responsibility, policing. Why wouldn't the federal government just help out in any event, right? Or anyway, I'd be interested to hear his justification.
Well, I don't think they want to talk about. I mean, the federal government, as Ryan Leal pointed out, this is mystifying because as we've talked about for well over a year, 2 years, probably in the previous iteration of this show, the federal government wants out of contract policing. And Nova Scotia is hanging by this sort of thread. Well, we get a 30% subsidy, so it's cheaper, but it's not cheaper
Yeah.
because you're getting fewer people. You're not getting the number of personnel you think you're getting, and you have no control over them. There's no accountability. But I guess a former accountant like the Premier of Nova Scotia thinks, well, we get a bill, we pay the bill, and it's all taken care of, and we don't have to have any oversight, and we don't have to hold anyone accountable. It's not our responsibility. They just get in their cars and drive around and give tickets out. I mean, it's sort of the basic sort of understanding of how policing works, and it's wrong.
Yeah. Well, if the federal government is truly looking to get out of contract policing, then perhaps they need to incentivize the alternatives by, by matching the funding commitments that they're making now through the RCMP to whatever provincial force or, regional forces within a province might be chosen as an alternative. Um, doesn't seem like an unfair way to think. If the province were to approach the federal government and have that kind of discussion, or if several other provinces. Of course, the premiers who got together this week in Ontario, they're all thinking of tariffs and economic measures, but there's no reason why the justice ministers, at least from the different provinces, couldn't be meeting together and doing so publicly and talking about these kind of issues, along with, Nova Scotian Canadian Justice Minister Sean Fraser.
Well, I've had in the conversations I've had this week with a number of people in policing, they keep going back to what works are large regional police forces building on the existing municipal forces. And if you feel the need, we do need, if you need another layer, a tiered layer, like it, it drives me crazy that, Premier Houston and, Haley Crichton and these people in the police services say we want a flat horizontal police force, one police force doing everything. Doesn't work. It's an invitation to criminals and it's an invitation to corruption because it's easily corrupted. You need tiered policing, municipal, provincial, federal levels, just to keep people honest
Yeah.
and to provide alternatives and to be able to amass power and manpower in various areas. If you have something go wrong, you got to be able to bring people together quickly. Regional forces do that. They overlap in a lot of things. They work together. And why not in the provinces here? Why don't we suck it up, admit we're not that big, and do a sort of a multi-provincial police force, a maritime police provincial police force.
Absolutely. Like areas that
Yep.
are adjacent to the borders, like Colchester County and Cumberland, like up that area could be uh, combined with New Brunswick and PEI forces in some ways too. That wouldn't be shouldn't be precluded, although
And then you have a federal police
different
force doing
tickets.
what it's supposed to do on top of that, transnational, international crime and cyber warfare, cyber crime, all that stuff. It makes perfect sense. And when I get someone like the Premier of Nova Scotia and his predecessor saying, but it's the money, we can't afford it. uh, you can't afford it if you think right and you think ahead and plan ahead. And what they do in Nova Scotia is never plan ahead. The thinking here is, it's the rural think. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, the RCMP's broke. I've got yin reports from the one we talked about at the beginning, right up the yin yang, saying it's broken. It needs to be fixed. We need to invest in it because it's going to make our country safer and wealthier because there will be crime, law enforcement. If you have no law enforcement, things go downhill.
It was unfortunate, or maybe who knows if the opportunity's come and gone, Paul, but we just went through a few years of significant population increase and thus economic growth, a lot of new tax revenue that went with that. Most of that went, it seems, to government projects in the healthcare sector, but there was a few years there post-pandemic where we were getting the real estate boom and a population influx. Whether that's going to continue on into the future, I don't know, but that might have been, just a real sweet spot of, okay, there's momentum from the Mass Casualty Commission and the reaction to that, plus a bit of a windfall of sorts in tax revenue because of the population influx. And now that's kind of all, the momentum. Well, I'm not sure where the momentum is publicly in terms of the police review. There was reaction to this report. I'm not sure how much the public is engaged. It's the summertime, all those kinds of things. Uh, but the economic, windfall, that window is closing, I think, at this point.
Well, but the fact is, you're paying Mounties a national rate so that a guy working in Yarmouth or on Cape Breton is making what he would be making or a female officer making what they would make in downtown Vancouver or downtown Toronto, whatever. They're not in downtown Toronto, but they're making big bucks. They're
Yeah.
often the richest people in the community. and
Well,
that's the policeman. You
well,
know,
you
you
talk
look at
about the mortgage size of
Haley
the.
Crichton gets out of university, and it looks like her and her husband, who's a constable in the RCMP, go out and plunk down, take up a $720,000 mortgage. Not a lot of people can do that in Nova Scotia.
No,
That's part of the problem with the RCMP. They make a lot of money, and you can't hold them accountable for anything.
uh, reading between the lines a little bit, you'd think, well, okay, maybe there's some family wealth or something involved there. Well, no, if you're mortgaging most of the value of the home, that's you're basing that home purchase on your salary. So the two combined salaries have to be enough to justify a loan at that level, which is significant. It would at least start with a three, I think, the combined salary.
Yeah, I mean, and that's public records. It's not like me making it up or, like that's there. And the real issue is you've got someone whose first major job appointed by a liberal government where the RCMP, a former RCMP, was the Solicitor General, Public Safety Minister, hires this person to be the manager of policing services in Nova Scotia. It looks like her first full-time job.
There was a
And
little,
that's right after the massacres.
yeah. Yeah, what quite the timing in a way, right? But maybe put in there for that reason. Who knows? Like the PhD thesis piece that I saw didn't really I don't know what to quite make of it. The theory I think behind it was that prisoners because of the nature of a prison, especially if you're in confinement a lot, you don't get to see many people, even other people within the prison. And so that is going to negatively affect your social skills. And thus, when you get out of prison, your ability to make friends, make new friends, to go do well in a job interview, to socialize appropriately in a job or employment setting, all of those kind, that kind of thing um, is worth studying. And so I think that's what her thought was, right? So think of ways either just to describe the situation or maybe she was trying to come up with solutions to, you know, how prisons can better work on socializing inmates in order so they can reintegrate better when they get out. I think that was the thrust of it,
That
but
was a paper. That wasn't even I can't find a dissertation.
okay, well,
That was a paper that she did with someone else, but that's the point. She was focusing on sociology and corrections and isolation and how to treat prisoners better. And then she gets plucked out of that and put into manager of policing services in Nova Scotia after the massacres. Then she's the person that looks like who's in charge of the review. And the review is announced. This is an interesting little juxtaposition as well. The review is announced at the end of September 2023 that it's being implemented after the Mass Casualty Commission issues its final report.
yeah,
A few days later, Dennis Daly, Assistant Commissioner of the RCMP, the police chief of the Nova Scotia RCMP, basically. Um, Dennis Daly puts out a statement talking about how wonderful it's going to be great times for the RCMP again. We've got our swagger back,
yes, I
he
remember
said.
that.
You remember that quote?
Yeah,
That's 2 weeks or so less after the review is announced and Haley Crichton and Claire McClellan are put in charge of it. And there's all kinds of optimism. But why were the RCMP so optimistic that Dennis Daly would say, we've got our swagger back? I think they were told, don't worry, nothing's going to happen here. We're going to give it all to you. That's what
well,
I think the government told them.
well, it would be important in that context to come out with confidence, right? And especially, the way he framed it. I remember, it was like, oh, we went through a rough patch, but here we are, right? And we've figured out the problems and we're gonna get better and here, yay, yay, rah, rah, right? So that wouldn't have been an accident timing it that way. So That's something else. Now I'm just remembering back as you said the comment before, Paul. Like I don't think on the screen when she was testifying it was Dr. Haley Crichton. So I think I would have that would
No,
have
it wasn't.
that would have jumped out at me if it was. I think it's probably the case that she didn't complete her PhD.
No, I'm just wondering. She got an $80,000 grant. I saw a story about that. And then she was working for 3 years for the RCMP or the Government of Newfoundland, depending on which CV you looked at. And then she goes to work for the RCMP. And now she's obviously a pro RCMP person running the police services inside the public safety ministry. And I want to know who else is in there. I want to know the names of all the Mounties, ex-Mounties who are working inside public safety ministries, not only in Nova Scotia, but in other provinces to get a measure of this. I used to be able to see lists in the old days when they had phone books, paper ones,
Yes.
and I could get them and see what was going on in BC and Nova Scotia. Those are gone, and now everything is sort of locked down. You can't sort of find out who's who inside these ministries. I need someone to basically see if they can get that to us because I would like to take it apart and dissect who these people are, who's making the decisions, who's advising the premier on what to do, or is the premier taking any advice whatsoever?
Well, that sounds like a job for citizen investigators. Somebody go through the sunshine list and see who's in the DOJ. That might start be a place to start. Uh,
And there you are. I
yeah.
don't know where Curt went today, but we'll
Yeah, we
that.
we lost out on Curt, the missing man, Curt Allen. Maybe they got to him.
Yeah.
They heard he was coming on the show. And they're like, well, that's I guess yeah, I guess that undercover officer was up to something after all.
Well, and since we're on this, I've got a few more minutes here. There's one other story about an old story that I came across. You know, in the past, I've talked about when the RCMP gets threatened with being taken out of contract policing, like they were in BC for a number of times over the last 15 years. You've seen politicians, including the former premier of BC, former Solicitor General Kashid, the mayor of Surrey, be charged with essentially trumped up criminal charges. When the threat goes away, the charges go away. You know, the message to politicians is quite obvious. If you mess with the RCMP, you're going to get in trouble.
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about what happened in Nova Scotia back in the early 2000s. In the late 1990s, during amalgamation, when Cape Breton Regional Police, there was a movement to take the RCMP out of Sydney area and let the Cape Breton Regional Police form the Breton Regional Police and take over that entire jurisdiction. And the RCMP fought it, and eventually this fellow named McMullen rises up and charges then Chief Edgar McLeod with lying, criminal lying. And he caused a police review board to be set up to examine all of this. And what was going on really was McMullen was sort of acting as a proxy for a bunch of Mounties who didn't want to move, were hiding behind. They didn't want to leave Cape Breton because they had a
Yeah.
cushy job there, making tons of money, low cost of living.
Low cost, yes, absolutely. To be making
Yeah,
bank.
live like kings. So McMullen, eventually the case went big, long, cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, the legal fees, and the police review board threw out the case against McMullen. But not only that, awarded costs against him.
Well,
Said his allegations were entirely fabricated, and Edgar McLeod was let go. But that's the way they fight, and that's the way what we have going on in Nova Scotia now. It's a big fight. And he makes me wonder, are people being threatened? Do they feel threatened? Do politicians feel threatened? Because there's a history for this kind of thing.
there was a I read that decision, Paul. You sent it to me. Thank you because I wasn't really. I was a young adult then and still in school actually. And so I knew it was happening, but I wasn't really paying attention that closely. So, but when you look through that cost decision, first of all, they say, well, we very rarely do this, award costs. Like in court civil cases, that's routine that you would award costs to the winner, portion of the legal costs. In this case, they say, well, we usually don't do this because, it's just not the way the board operates. But they did in that case award costs to the Cape Breton Regional Police. They said that the complaints, it was supposed to be a hearing about the merits of the RCMP, but it just devolved into like personal complaints and complaints about individual. Anyway, so they were very critical of the way that the case proceeded. But there was another name on there that I recognized as having made the original decision, I think that was being appealed, and that was Troy Jenkins, who was a counselor down there. He was a young guy. But I'd have to, when I saw that, I didn't have a chance to look it up or talk to anybody about it, but he was kind of run out of town, I think, as a counselor, because he ended up taking a job as a municipal clerk in Geisper County. So there's something there. There might anyway. I'd be interested to see if there's any connection to the police situation. If
Yeah.
somebody could tell us.
Like everything, as you well know, in Nova Scotia is a mystery, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Not always records of it. So, well, that's what we discover these things and bring them to Nova Scotia and national audience, and we do it every week. We may not do it every week in the summer as August comes along, but we're
Well,
here.
the other thing is, on this whole Haley Crichton story.
Yeah,
In my old days in journalism, people would be jumping on doing this story because there's the police chiefs are complaining that they don't understand how the Nova Scotia government came to its decision because the Deloitte Touche report, which they pay, hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars for, didn't recommend what they said. And even then, the Deloitte Touche report was kind of sketchy because we don't know who the authors were.
no names attached.
How
Just
many ex bounties were in that? So we don't know any of this stuff. But then this happens, and then you find out that the person who made the decision, who seems to have made the decision, is pushing it and is the face of the decision, may have a problem because, you know, their husband and their job depends probably upon the RCMP being the police of Nova Scotia. That could be perceived as a conflict. You think there would be media reporting about this. So this is the other problem we have now.
yeah.
Who is going to report on this? We should maybe have a lottery, like pick a date, see if
Yeah,
someone reports, and or
I'd
is it going
say.
to have to wait for me to write another book to explain all of this?
Well, I'd put Frank Magazine first, but that might involve you actually doing the article, so that wouldn't
No,
count.
no, I can't write in Frank's style.
Oh no, no. And then I don't know, like all Nova Scotia doesn't cover this stuff. Like why isn't somebody on this? Like the CBC has court reporters and they have
CBC
political
has
reporters that have nothing to do all summer. What
CBC
they do.
reporters. I don't know. I wouldn't even want to get into that. I mean, the Halifax Chronicle Herald in the old days might have, but I mean, it used to have like 120 people or so in its newsroom. Now it has 10 or 12. That's the problem right there.
Yeah.
There's just not enough personnel to do the stories. So trying to get their attention is very difficult. I think I might have their attention now, but we're going to see.
Well, we're gonna keep pushing things, Paul, and see what happens out there. And hey, as long as people enjoy listening, we're gonna keep at it, and lots of people are too. We're getting good viewer numbers and lots of nice comments. So we appreciate all that. Appreciate the feedback as always, and send us messages, send us ideas, tips, or whatever you're thinking. Always
Yep.
glad to hear from people.
Yeah, and we need more. I want to know what's going on inside of public safety and anywhere else. It's important. This is important stuff. And We're doing the best we can, and I'm still pursuing. I got some interesting new stuff on who killed Corey Ellison, but later.
All right. Well, we'll come back with that next show and hopefully find Curt Allen somewhere along the way and make sure he's all right. So, okay. Thanks, Paul. We'll see you again soon. Everybody out there, thanks for watching and thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
See you next week.